Welcome to the Founders of Web3 series by Outlier Ventures and me, your host, Jamie Burke. Together we're going to meet the entrepreneurs, their backers and the leading policymakers that are shaping Web3. Together we're going to try to define what is Web3, explore its nuances and understand the mission and purpose that drive its founders. If you enjoy what you hear, please do subscribe, rate and share your feedback to help us reach as many people as possible with the important mission that is Web3. Welcome, Lou. It's great to have you on the podcast as one of our first guests. I guess we've known each other virtually for a while now. I'm guessing a couple of years, possibly. We were introduced by James Haft, but I don't think we've ever had the pleasure of meeting in person. I think we've tried a couple of times. But
no, I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
So obviously I've been following a lot of what you've been doing, community building within the crypto space. By way of background, you've been both an investor at Flight Partners, which was an Israeli syndicate. I believe it was one of the largest ones on Angel's List at one point. You have been quite active in Web2 with the Social Internet Fund, and then you also advise fund of funds in the blockchain space and crypto. But you're probably best known for your work around CryptoMondays, which has lots of kind of spin-offs at the moment, including CryptoZ TV and Crypto VR. And I guess we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But it would be great to hear, what still fascinates you about the space. I'm always kind of try to avoid doing a Genesis story because that can go on for quite a while, but it's good to know, we're quite a way in. You've been around in the space for a while. Why are you still here? What keeps you in?
It's a great question. Actually, I just wrote a post a couple days ago titled "Why I'm Leaving Crypto," and obviously it was a great clickbait title because I am not leaving crypto.
You got me. I did click.
But I think we're going through a period of time now. Obviously we had the massive run up in 2017, and then the industry was a lot bigger then, and a lot of people who were just here for the money left in 2018. And then the people who really believed, who had seen the crypto light, if they could, they stuck around 2019, and now here we are 2020. Really 2 years into the bear market. And I'm starting to see people who actually have seen the crypto light, really questioning if what they see is real. And some of them are leaving crypto. And so the point of my post is not that I'm leaving crypto, but really why I'm still here. And I'm still here. I pointed out a number of things about why I'm still here, but ultimately it's because, and what we've seen over the world over the last few months just highlights it is, the world is incredibly broken and our systems are incredibly broken. And I think they're irreparably broken. And so at the core, I'm still here in crypto because I think that crypto represents a better way. And, it's early days and we've got a ways to go to get there. But I don't want to spend my time working on an irreparably broken system. And this is a new system, and the things that continue to give me confidence that it's a better system, is simply because there's no man in the middle, and I'm not going to get into that aspect of it because I assume most of the people on your podcast are aware of that. And the other things that really kind of continue to sustain me is, first I was here around for the internet bubble and burst, and the mistake I made was I let the market going down tell me and inform me about the truth of the internet and the impact the internet was going to have on society. And while the market's a signal, the market is not truth. And so I'm taking the market as a signal now, but not as truth. I was just at ETH Denver a couple months ago, and this is an industry that's still attracting some of the smartest people on the planet who are passionate about crypto and who see the same things that that you and I see. And, even though we're still in this bear market, there are some things that are scaling. Speculation in Asia was the first thing to scale. I was in Asia 4 times last year, and it's just a totally different world in crypto Asia than it is in crypto US or crypto Europe. There's still Lambos at the events there because there's a lot of money being made there now. A lot of it's speculation, most of it's speculation, but there are also a lot of investment going on there in trying to build core technologies. And it's not just speculation, but over the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of scaling in DeFi. And obviously, we had a bit of a plane crash in MakerDAO, but anybody who understood how things work knew that we were going to have plane crashes. And by the way, spoiler alert, that's not our last plane crash. So while we're still 2 years into this bear market, I still see plenty of reasons to be remarkably positive.
And I mean, my kind of sense on things, because like you, I have exposure to crypto in lots of different markets, notwithstanding the fact that I'm based in Europe, which has a particular flavor and a sentiment that sometimes trails others, but is also quite separate. But equally, I also spent quite a bit of time in Asia, in China last year. And it feels like in the US, there is a bit more capitulation. There seems to be this return back to Bitcoin and Bitcoin maximalism. Is that true? It's just what I seem to be picking up on Twitter compared to say, Asia.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? We can all get this distorted view of what's going on based on the particular individuals we follow or have respect for on Twitter. Look, the U.S. To call it capitulation, I guess. We are. One of the things that I was struck by on my first trip to Asia was, I met some guys from Circle at the first events, and I asked them how it was going, and they're saying, "Oh, it's horrible. We're leaving." And I'd never seen people working at a company talking about how they had one foot out the door 5 minutes after I met them. And it was because what they were telling me was so broadly well known, and that's that Circle, as well as any other U.S. company, can't compete because of the regulatory environment in the United States. Even if they're in Asia, they still have to comply with a lot of things. So, I think for regulatory reasons, by wide margin, the number one thing, it's just, the U.S. is still very much in a bear market. There's still a lot of innovation going on in New York, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, and other cities, Seattle. But, obviously the level of activity is, 10-20% of what it was a couple years ago.
So is it true to say that US startups, in a sense, are kind of fighting with one arm behind their back in the sense that they just can't do the dance around regulation that other startups can just by, re-domiciling somewhere else that's a bit more friendly?
Yes. And so, the stuff that's happening here again, and it's a lot of stuff in DeFi is happening here, but, the bottom line is if you have to ask for permission to do whatever it is you want to do in crypto, the answer is going to be no. So, the DeFi guys who are scaling, like Maker, like DeFi Zap, like Uniswap, they're not calling the government and asking permission. They're just going out there and they're doing it.
Well, and I think, certainly if we look at the action that has happened from the SEC, putting aside, outright fraud, if anything, they've certainly set a precedent, which is to just do it and beg for forgiveness afterwards, right? Good actors that have tried to engage with them over very long periods often end up running out of money. They just can't afford the legal fees. So it's so what is that then doing to the startup ecosystem? Are they relocating, or is it just pushing them more to the extreme of decentralization and things like DeFi?
Yeah, no, the people who really want to do something in an area that is regulated, they have to leave. You cannot do it here. Coinbase, obviously, they were the first one. They had some success. But I think, if you take a look at FTX as an example, you familiar with FTX?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. They're a great company. A bunch of Americans sitting in Hong Kong, building a great derivatives platform. So you can do it if you're American. If you leave and work for a company that isn't domiciled in the United States, and that's what a lot of people are doing. Go to Asia, go to Berlin. A lot of Americans in the Berlin ecosystem, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that, and this is an impossible question to answer, so it's really kind of just your gut instinct, but do you think with all the macro stuff that's happening at the moment, this is going to be beneficial in the US for crypto? Or do you think it's just going to kind of distract everybody from even considering innovation in this space for some time?
Sure. So, like the weird thing is, right, we all, have our life experience, and we extrapolate from our life's experience, even though sometimes it's from very small samples. But yeah, I was there at the beginning. My first company was the largest streamer of video in 2000, except for it's, the experience sucked because the pipes weren't ready.
Yeah.
And fast forward 5 years, I was there when somebody uploaded a video called Lazy Sunday onto this tiny little website called YouTube. And YouTube that day became the fastest growing website in the history of the world. In 5 years, and a few months later, they were acquired for $1.5 billion by Google. And that happened for a number of reasons. But at the end of the day, I really feel like we as an industry have to build products that people want to use and can use. And if we do that, which I think it's inevitable that we will do that, then we'll have our crypto moment, and something will go mainstream, and then the second thing will go mainstream, and then and then we'll see a bubble that's going to dwarf the last bubble. And the only question I have no doubt that's coming. The only question is it 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years? I'm pretty sure it's closer to 1 year or 1 month than 10 years. But that's something that nobody has the answer to.
Yeah, and then it's a case of staying solvent, right, until that moment happens.
Exactly. Well, there's a great. Do you know who Bill Gross from Idea Lab is?
I don't.
So my first company, I was an equity analyst. I'd kind of bounced around earlier in my career with little success, and then I found my way to Wall Street, and I was become an equity analyst, and I ended up at Goldman Sachs, and I was kind of living the dream, and I was very happy with my work. Equity analysts were well paid in late '99, but in my gut, I'm an entrepreneur, and I was still working for the man. And I got a call to be the CEO of a internet company by the first internet incubator called Idea Lab. Bill Gross, the smartest guy I've ever met. I joined Idea Lab as the 55th company in the incubator in January of 2000. In February, he raised $1 billion cash. About 4 years ago, he did a TED Talk where he did a data analysis of the more than 200 companies he started, including 8 unicorns, including what I believe to be the best business idea in the history of mankind, which is paid search, which was his idea. And anyways, he did the data analysis, and in the TED Talk, he's also a great speaker. He says he called the company Idea Lab because he thought it was all about the idea. And then after a couple of years, he realized it was all about the management. And then he eventually ran the numbers and found that by a wide margin, the dominant factor driving success of startups is timing. It's not what they did as much as when they did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as somebody that's watched the web evolve, web 1, 2, and now let's call it 3. I mean, do you refer to this space as web 3? I know you prefer the kind of crypto moniker, but does web 3 make sense to you to define as a paradigm?
It makes sense for me. I really don't care. I think what's more important than what we call it is that we all kind of call it the same thing. And, that's a struggle that every industry has when it's new, and we'll coalesce around something eventually. I'm happy using Web3. I certainly understand that, I was there at Web2. The second company I ran was the largest social network in the world before MySpace. So I was there at the beginning of the promise of Web2 and how it was going to get rid of all the gatekeepers. And obviously what we ended up with were just bigger, more dominant gatekeepers. And so, thinking of this as Web3 and thinking of this as really giving the power to the people, to the community, that was the promise of Web2. It didn't turn out that way. It's the promise of Web3, and time will tell whether it turns out that way or not. I still think that there's, a very, very, significant chance that this will end up just being controlled by, the same guys who controlled Web2. Because they've got massive tools to use, whether it's capital or people or lobbyists and such to make sure that they stay in power.
Yeah, and obviously we've already seen with Facebook Libra that move. I mean, it's interesting. Prior to crypto or even investing, I set up one of the first social media agencies, consultancies in Europe, and I remember.
Time frame?
Oh God, I can never really remember the year, but it's got to be. I remember even prior to that, I was so I originally worked in WPP, the advertising group, and I was the first person to bring Twitter and Facebook into JWT when they had like a sales team of, I don't know, 2-3 people in the UK.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I remember a lot of hubris and naivety that this was going to change everything for the better. I mean, we're all often utopists at heart, right? We all kind of hope the world's going to improve. And of course, fast forward to where we are now with surveillance capitalism and however you want to call it, the dominant model of cloud platforms, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So I do think it's a really interesting question. What can we learn from that? And I was going to ask you, if it is Web3, if it is something distinct to Web2, what is different or what promises to be different? And then, you were talking about some of the watch outs where I guess the key one would be if we think this is all about disintermediation, it's about decentralization, then, where are the threats for centralization and middlemen reestablishing themselves?
So, yeah, I mean, I'll just address the last thing. So, the challenges we have, I think that the biggest difference between crypto and everything that came before crypto is community. Because if you decentralize, then you're empowering the community. And at the end of the day, the world's worked where there's always been somebody in the middle, and that person is solving for themselves. And now we can solve for the community, and we could set rules for how the community functions, and they can be algorithms, so we know they're going to be followed. And the struggles that we have and what we need to get better at are the two tenets of communities, which are what are the token economics? How do we incentivize people in the community to act in the best interests of the community? And the other is governance and consensus. How do we move forward as a community? Because if we can't move forward, the world changes, the world evolves. There's a great Thomas Jefferson quote, because there was a big battle when they wrote the Constitution in the United States about whether the Constitution should be set in stone or whether it should be a living document. And he forcefully argued it should be a living document because, otherwise would be like forcing a grown man to wear the coat that fit him as a little boy. And so most crypto companies are going to decentralize. Crypto companies are going to have some form of governance that enables them to evolve. And we're not there yet in terms of having a functional governance system for decentralized organizations, at scale. Bitcoin is Bitcoin in some degrees because its governance is broken. And so everybody knows what it's going to be and therefore can have a lot of faith in it, which is interesting. But Bitcoin's, competing against gold, which hasn't, to some degree, at least that's what I think it is, which hasn't changed in 5,000 years. So it doesn't have to evolve very much, I think, to, supplant gold. But I think most other crypto entities are actually going to have decentralized entities are going to have functional governance systems, and there really aren't any yet.
Yeah, and I guess this is what's led you into the world of DAOs, but I just want to kind of pick up on what I think is a key word in what you said, which is around rules and the ability for us to potentially have a rules-based web. I guess not one set of rules, but a number of competing constitutions and rules, presumably those that are the most friendly or enabling or least extractive. That's where the most economic value will flow to. And, I think if you look at some of the failings, or not even failings, right? The reason why the web is the way it is today, if you look at some of the kind of founding fathers of that and the dogma that they brought to it, you of course had the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, which pretty much said, we don't want any rules here. It'll be run by a market, and quite a kind of free market fundamentalist attitude towards the market will solve for problems, and in a way it did. You had these commercial entities solve for there being no identity native to the web, there being no form of reputation, there being no kind of property rights. But in the end, that created this evolutionary niche for these platforms to emerge. And so, I also kind of really like this idea about the ability to hard code rules into the web in order that they can be more orderly, or at least we can understand the rules of the game in a way that perhaps with the web now it's implicit rather than explicit.
Yeah, I mean, look, right now we live in a world, for the most part, where the institutions that we have to interact with, they don't even tell us the rules, and if they do tell us the rules, they're lying, and if they're not lying, then they're just changing them because they can. And that's the way humanity has always worked. And now there's the opportunity for a better system. And I've talked a lot about community without actually even giving a definition for it, because again, nomenclature is important. For me, when I use the term community, what I mean is an ecosystem where everybody gets more out of it than they put in, which is kind of like magical. And if you think, when I think about how big communities can become, I think that there's a high correlation between how much a community can scale and the delta or the difference between how much it costs them to produce the good that they give to the community. Right? People belong to communities because they're getting value from it. And so the question is, what's the difference between how much it costs the community to build or create what it is that the community members value, and how much the community members value that out. So the difference between those two things, I think, will drive the scale, or be highly correlated to the scale of the community. And if you think about what are the biggest communities today, the biggest communities today in the world are religions. Why? Because they have the biggest delta, right? They create faith, and faith doesn't cost anything to make. It's free to manufacture. They can manufacture an infinite amount of faith, and it doesn't cost them anything more. And people, millions or billions and billions of people, would give their lives for their faith. So as crypto, and that's the framework I use for crypto communities. What's the value that we're creating? How much does it cost us? And how much is our community members valuing that? If you can get a big enough delta there, I think you can create, build a big business.
Right. So let's jump into DAOs, because obviously there's a natural kind of leap. Now, you recently did DAO Fest, which I dialed into, albeit quietly, observing. To be honest, I felt a bit old, which is normally a good thing in these instances. So on the one hand, I kind of, listening to it, the cynic in me was a bit skeptical and thinking, wow, there's a lot of hubris and naivety there. At the same time, there was a lot of energy and excitement and kind of positivity about the possibilities. And actually, I think that mix is really healthy. But I'll be honest, up until that point, I'd always been hopeful about the promise of DAOs, but kind of skeptical short to midterm that it would ever break out of the crypto community. But after listening to that, I went away quite energized about its possibility, and then went down a bit of a rabbit hole as to the kind of state of play with the stack that or stacks that have been built around DAOs, whether that's DAO stack itself or any others, and had kind of my tech guys look at it, and it's pretty mature. And I kind of just had the feeling that Bitcoin emerged in 2008 as a response to 2008, or as the folklore has it. And I could imagine, so that for me was a question of what is money. And if we look at the DAO, maybe now is the time for the DAO, because that is what is work. When everyone's going to be out of work, or having to work in a more decentralized way. But it'd be great to kind of jump into that a little bit. What have you learned from this time you've invested in going deep into the DAO space, and what do you see as its opportunities in the short to midterm?
Sure. So, I think my first real kind of deep initiation into the DAO world was via Matan Feld, who's the founder of DAO Stack. Before I got into crypto, I was investing in tech companies founded by Israelis, and I had been into crypto a bit before that. So when I started going to Israel, I also, I really enjoyed meeting with crypto-related companies there, and there are a lot of OGs in Israel. That's where zero knowledge proof was invented, right? They're big on cryptography. And what Matan was building at DAO Stack, or Aragon was building, or Colony is building, is this stack of tools to enable complex organizations to be run in a decentralized fashion. And and it's incredibly complex. And in fact, Jamie, I have no doubt you believe this too. If you're a VC and you've done startups and stuff, but until you take a product and put it out in the marketplace, you don't have any fucking idea about anything. It's just, right? There's data and there are opinions, and really, who gives a fuck about opinions? Let's get some data. Let's get out there and let's, build a business. And what happened in the DAO world was you had these brilliant guys, and by Matan's brilliant before he did DAO Stack. He was a string physicist, and and I think he's thinking deeply, and a lot of smart people work at DAO Stack and are helping him think deeply about how this works. But what happened was, while all this deep thinking was going on, there was this other incredibly brilliant guy, Amin Soleimani. Do you know Amin?
I know of him. I don't know him in person.
Yeah, but Amin's awesome. Amin lives in LA. I'm originally from LA and still hang out a lot there. So, I've gotten to know him, although the first time I met him was when, I ended up at a random meetup in Miami just because I was in there and didn't have anything to do. And there were like 10 guys there. And Amin at that time was famous, in my view, for having started SpankChain, which is a cryptocurrency for the adult industry. Because, at least in the United States, it's very difficult to get a bank account if you work in the adult industry. And he spent half the meetup talking about SpankChain and half of the meetup talking about his more recent project, which was called the Moloch DAO. And essentially, what Amin came up with is the minimum viable DAO, which is really, what you need to do. Just fucking get out there and do it and learn. And so the Moloch DAO, the original Moloch DAO, was to be a grant-giving platform, because Amin thought that the current Ethereum grant-giving platform was kind of broken. And, because it was so functional, his minimum viable DAO, and I think kind of the biggest innovation he had, is the rage quit. So you could give money.
I love that.
Yeah, exactly. So you could give money to the DAO, and then if the DAO voted on something and you didn't like it, then, you could get all your money back that hadn't been spent up to that date, and no money had been spent that you hadn't agreed with or said, I'll leave my money in the DAO. And just that little bit of innovation and the minimum viable, and within a couple months, he got Joe Lubin to participate and Vitalik to participate, and became a big thing. And and it was forkable. And now, a year later, there are more than 100 forks of Moloch DAO, and including things that have scaled like Metacartel. And and certainly, everybody else in DAOs, has woken up and said, okay, let's all, now, let's go to the minimum viable DAO, and then we'll build up from there. And so there's just an extraordinary amount of innovation going on today in DAOs. But to be clear, what's working now is like single cell or two cell amoebas. They can do a very, very, very simple function, but once there's no complexity yet. And so, how we get from here to there, nobody knows exactly how, but at least now we're on a path that's moving forward, and that's incredibly exciting.
Well, I guess it's like most tech, right? That the early adopters are going to be those that are marginalized. So of course, the sex industry and technology have been long intertwined. And then of course, I think if you look at whether it's gambling or gaming, I think teenagers who are of course marginalized, certainly economically, their inability to participate in the economy. And I think what really struck me as I went down that rabbit hole, having gone to your DAO Fest, was was this merging of the gaming community and DAOs, and how a lot of the language that's used to describe roles, functions, features in DAOs are directly correlated to gaming culture and like clans and stuff like that you have in these massively multiplayer gaming environments. So do you think that your gaming is going to be the breakaway environment for the application of DAOs, or do you just think it's a generational thing that there's this linkage between the people that are adopting DAOs and crypto and gaming?
Yeah, look, that's great insight and great question. So when I first saw the crypto light, and when I saw it because of my background, I saw the importance of community. I think we all see something different. I think crypto's infinite. I think we're all right, when we see something different. But but I saw community, and I saw governance and consensus, and I saw token economics, not day one, but pretty quickly. And when I saw token economics, my mind was blown, and so I was like immediately set out to try and find like the smartest token economics people I could find, and literally the people were charging $500, $1,000 an hour to do token economics, and I was talking to these like the leading consultants who were and plus 1% of the, I mean, it was crazy what these guys were getting paid, and like the first 3 or 4 guys I talked to, I knew more about token economics than they did, and I didn't fucking know anything. And I was shocked that the people were paying these guys $1,000 to tell them drivel. And then like the 4th or 5th guy I got introduced to, like the first thing he said blew me away, and the second thing he said blew me away even more. And I said, hold on a minute, how do you know these things? And he had said that he had run token economics for Zynga, right? Which was, and they had 50 million, 100 million people, token economics systems. So he had actually learned how token economics work. He hadn't drawn it out on a board and theorized about it, but he had actually done it. And that's the guy, that guy's name is Tom Bollock. And, I said at the time that token economics, that there, when I first saw it, like one of the first things I wrote about it is, and we're going to graduate people in PhD programs with token economics degrees. And about 3 or 4 months ago in Crypto Monday, New York, I was did a fireside chat with the woman who, a professor who started the first PhD program in token economics at the University of Vienna. So, again,
Yes,
we have
it's
these
good
problems,
for us.
but like the smartest people in the world are working to solve them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most exciting things for me. If you want any kind of signal, it's where are the best and brightest, applying their brains and brain power, and it still continues to be this domain. And if you look at the breadth of different backgrounds and stuff, one kind of final thing I want to talk on, again linked to DAOs and gaming, is NFTs. I know that you've also been exploring that a little bit. You've also recently launched CryptoMondays VR. So I think you're looking at virtual reality, mixed reality. So what's your perspective on NFTs? Do you think their time has come in 2020, or what's your view on the market?
Sure. So, going back, because I think NFTs are just another thing that, okay, well, what is an NFT? What function do they have? And I'll tell you what I think an NFT is, right? So, going back to what I talked about in community, you have this idea of token economics and this idea of value creation in community between, how much it costs a community to manufacture the value it gives the members and how much the members value that at. And so, it's my view that the majority of the value that's going to be given to the community is in stuff that it doesn't cost the community anything to produce, right? I talked about faith. Faith doesn't cost anything to produce. When I ran Bolt, which was the largest social network in the world before MySpace, 23 million kids at our peak, we could get a couple million kids to do anything for a badge that would scroll around their profile conferring status in our community. Status in a community, people, it's free to manufacture, and people can value that at a very high rate. Everybody wants to be a part of a community, and everybody wants to be respected, right? And as part of that community. And so when I saw NFTs, when I first got into it, I said, look, I know there's status, and I know there got to be other things that are going to be free to manufacture that people value very highly. That's what NFTs are to me. There's these things that we can create for zero, And and whatever they are and what they are, I mean, people just think of them as memorabilia, but that's that's just the first kernel of what these things are going to be. To Ticketmaster, every ticket is an NFT that can be imbued with different rights and values that can be torn apart and sold off as one-offs. So I think that NFTs are going to be a incredibly foundational element of how this whole ecosystem works,
because of their role that they can play in community building. And as you said, community crypto for you is ultimately about community.
Right. For community reward. How do you reward, right? This is about, right, we all want to be part of ecosystems that give us more value than we give it, right? And everybody's got to get that. In order for that to happen, right, you have to be able to create things that people value at a lot more than it costs you to create them, and the lowest value of creation is zero. And we're at the very beginning of what NFTs are going to be. The first company I ran was the top level domain.tv. And I spent a lot of time in the domain name space, right? Domain names are NFTs, right? And what can be part of a domain name? I mean, it can be infinite what can be part of a domain name, right? And now, domain names are also now going to be, a lot of our wallets are going to be identified by our domain names, I think, going forward. And those are all NFTs. So, I think NFTs are really, really not appreciated. I think most people have, I think I have a much more expansive view of what they are than most people do.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think most people, I mean, the reality is most people can only see what's in front of them, right? So they'll have a very narrow definition on what's possible today. So one of the things that we want to focus on this podcast is really the founders that are driving, defining, building Web3. In your mind, who are the most exciting emerging founders out there, and what is it that impresses you about what they're achieving now in Web3?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, going to Asia and spending time in Asia, it's completely blown away by CZ and, what he's doing, and, buying coin market cap, right? I mean, these guys are seeing a bigger future than anybody in the United States, right? Could they be wrong? Sure. But if they're right, and this is what we all fucking think it is, these guys, CZ's going to be looked upon as a genius, and somebody else who I think gets ripped in the US. If you spend your life on the Twitter sphere and don't go outside of that, and by the way, I spend way too much time in the Twitter sphere, so I have massive biases. I have no doubt. One of the other guys is Justin Sun from Tron. Right now, you can say, well, all he's doing is copying and pasting MakerDAO to give his own thing. But okay, if you can do that, if that's legal, now you could say, well, should it be legal or shouldn't it be legal? That's another question. But the bottom line is he's doing it, and he's building a company. And, and MakerDAO is going to have to fucking deal with it. And everybody who's whining is just wasting their time. I think what the guys in Maker are doing is awesome. I think Uniswap, oh my God, decentralized liquidity. I think is one of the, probably it's the most mind-blowing thing I've seen in the 2.5 years that I've been 24/7 crypto. And it's all just started. And to some degree, I don't even think it's started yet. It's still so small, which is part of the joy is, most people who get it is, we're all working together, rowing in the same direction. There's no reason to fight over anything because there's only crumbs here today. But, let's bake a cake and then we can fight over the slices.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite reassuring to hear that perspective from somebody based out in the US, because, I mean, and clearly it's a byproduct of the fact that you've invested time in traveling into other regions. And I think, we will look to interview founders from across the spectrum on the podcast. We have, several already lined up that you mentioned. And in some ways, they're seen as controversial or frowned upon because, and I think it's largely a cultural thing, right? The approach to entrepreneurism out of Asia and China, and the focus on execution and deal making, the kind of aggression behind it is weirdly frowned upon now, which, the US was always known for that in the past. I find it quite strange.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, right. I mean, if you're a trailblazer, like, I'm always shocked at, for me personally, I'm not a fanboy of very many people, but Elon Musk, he's the Thomas Edison of our day. I mean, oh my God. And yet, go on the Twitter sphere and there's massive amounts of hate for him. I don't get it. But and community, right? There's massive amounts of hate, just in community. And, what you have to realize, I've spent a lot of time in community, and thought a lot about, well, why is there all this hate? And why is there all this vitriol? And what a waste of fucking time and energy. And wouldn't the world be a better place if this didn't exist? And I've now come out the other end and actually believe that it's a feature. It's not a bug. Everybody's who they are and has a worldview about how they can make things better. And the more you allow people to do that, and the more freedom you give people to, achieve their vision, because, nobody knows whose visions is really right. So, and that's what I love about crypto is it's the opportunity for people to see a better world and use tools in a Lego way quite often, right? I mean, that's one of the other amazing things is, in DeFi is like this world of Legos. We just put different ones together. Now you've got a new company. Anyways, this has been awesome. This has been a lot of fun. It's exciting to talk about.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get you on again. So maybe to just close off, do you want to share a little bit more about how people can get involved in Crypto Mondays, Crypto VR, and Crypto 2TV?
Sure. So, if you live in a city that doesn't have a Crypto Mondays, obviously today nobody's having in-person events, but you can start it off as a virtual event, in your city. I think it's a great time to do that. I think easier to grab people's attention with interesting content today than it will be when people get to go outside again and they can drink again, because that's attractive to a lot of people. So that's Crypto Mondays. Crypto, I didn't talk that much about it, but Crypto ZTV. Z is for Zoom, so it's just a platform, again, similar to Crypto Mondays, to help people who have an idea for a show and want to do something over Zoom, to help them. We have Zoom, we have an audience a little bit that we can bring them, but just to give people a platform to help them find their own audience and build their own audience. And I think if we get enough of those going, we'll figure some more things out. I think. We're already learning a lot of interesting lessons.
And finally, what's your Twitter handle, Lou?
I'm at Lou Kerner, and I'm also, as I said, an active blogger on Medium.
Great. Look, thanks for your time. Really great to chat. We'll definitely get you on again at some point, and looking forward to seeing how initiatives like DAO Fest progress. So thanks for taking me back down the DAO rabbit hole.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jamie, and thanks for everything you and Outlier Ventures do for the community.
No problem. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and share your feedback to help us reach as many people as possible with the important mission of Web3.